right. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Gorowski, and I'll be your host for today. If you haven't joined us yet this month, we've got somewhere between 40 to 50 live events for classrooms to tune into. So do take a moment and visit our site, exploringbytheseat.com, where you can find all the events and how to register to join live in camera spots, live via YouTube, or catch the recorded events later. So I'm really excited. We're going to head out on a little virtual field trip right now. We're heading out into the Pacific on board exploration vessel Nautilus to join a 20-day expedition mapping the sea floor on Liliʻuokalani Seamounts. This is located in the expansion area of the Papahānaumokuākea Marine National Monument. And since this area hasn't really been explored yet, it's really important to do this mapping of the seamounts to pinpoint future dive sites that ROVs will be exploring in the near future. I believe there's another expedition in 2022. So we've got a great team joining us today. We've got Cassie Weathersby joining us. She's the Science Communication Fellow on board. We've got Emil Petrencio joining us. He's the expedition leader. And I believe we even have Andrew Chase joining us, who's a mapping intern on board Nautilus right now. So I'm going to bring them in live with us right now. Hey, Nautilus crew, how are we doing?
Good morning, Joe.
Good morning, Joe. We're doing great here on the Nautilus. We're so
Awesome.
excited to be joined by everybody.
Of course. We're great. Thrilled to have you joining us. We've got classrooms joining us in Canada and the United States today. So I'm going to let you guys take over for a little bit, and then I know they're going to have lots of questions for you.
Great. Well, I just thought we would just take you on a ship tour since you're going to be officially our virtual exploration partners. This is our Nautilus. When we look at the EV Nautilus, or the exploration vessel Nautilus, she is 224 feet long. Emily and I are joining you live from this control van up here, where we're able to kind of direct all of the action. Now, as Joe mentioned before, we're currently mapping the seafloor. That sonar mapping is attached to the bottom of our ship, and it sends out a ray of sound waves and about a 70-degree angle that allows us to get some really beautiful high-resolution multi-beam maps. On the back deck, you can see all of our ROVs, or remote operated vehicles, Hercules and Argus being some of the more famous ones, and I'll show you a lovely shot of those ROVs. But it is important that we know exactly where to launch our ROVs. So that's one of the reasons why we're out here sort of exploring and making excellent maps. But this is my favorite ROV on the planet, Joe. This is our ROV Hercules. So you can see it has some really fantastic lights, which is important when we go down in the sea. Some of the colors of light are kind of washed out or absorbed by the water column, red being the first one. So you'll notice a lot of organisms down deep do tend to have that red colors because it's excellent camouflage down in the deep. So we bring our own light so that we're able to see those true colors. We have some lovely cameras that allow us to take some video imagery, which our audience can watch live. Very exciting. You'll be able to see that on our next leg of the cruise in a different site. And then we have some arms that allow us to take geologic samples as well as some biological samples. And then one of my more favorite little attachments down here is known as the slurp. It's super fun to watch the slurp because it's like a vacuum cleaner attachment. You can watch us take up some samples, and it just goes right up into this little collection jar, which is always just fun to watch. We have some push cores. We're able to take some sediment samples, and then some Niskin bottles where we're able to take some water samples, including environmental DNA, which is very exciting because then we can tell what animals like to live in that area, even if they're not there, which is really cool. And then we have Argus here in the background, and Argus is very important. We can launch Argus by himself, but Hercules needs to have Argus to help kind of settle out those wave motions. And as Joe mentioned, we are not launching either of these ROVs on this cruise. We're just trying to get a nice map, but we will be coming back out into this area based on the maps that we're making today in the next cruise or next season. Yeah. And so, Emil, if you want to talk a little bit about our mission here.
Yeah. So this mapping is being done by a team of 6, 3 experienced mappers and 3 mapping interns. and then led by mapping coordinator Aaron Heffron. But we're getting some beautiful views of these seamounts along the Liliʻuokalani Ridge that we think are as old as 75 to 90 million years old. And so this multi-beam sonar that we use paints up a picture of the seafloor in a swath that could be as wide as 8 kilometers, 5 miles wide under the ship. And very detailed, the resolution going down to 10 meters for each depth sounding. So it's as if we had, well, we get 432 returns from each ping of that sonar. So imagine the old way of dropping a lead weight over the side. Imagine 432 ships dropping a lead weight stretched out across 5 miles. That's what we're doing every ping as we cruise along at 10 knots. So we cover a lot of seafloor, but the ocean is huge. And we'll take a look at the, let's take a look at that, the multi-beam coverage in the Pacific. The ocean is huge. There's a lot to map. And what we're doing is mapping America. We have more than half of U.S. territory lies underwater in our exclusive economic zone, which stretches 200 miles from the coast. And only slightly more than half of that EEZ has been mapped. And so the Papahānaumokuākea Marine National Monument extends out to that EEZ boundary. There's a lot to map out there. So most of the boundaries were established in 2016, extending 50 miles from the islands and the small atolls stretching to the northwest of Hawaii. And it was expanded to in 2016 to the 200-mile limit. Very little of that outer envelope of the monument has been mapped. So just to give you a feel for, it takes 3 days to map one of these seamounts. They're large. The one King George that we mapped last week is the size of Mount Shasta in California, rising 4,300 meters from the seafloor. These are big features, and it's going to be exciting to explore them next season.
Very excited. And we also have our mapping intern, Andrew, out on deck, and he's just going to kind of talk about his role on the ship, because honestly, he's kind of the heart of the mission.
There's Andrew.
All right.
Hi, Andrew. We can see you just fine.
All right. Well, thanks, Cassie. I am a student at the University of Hawaii studying geology, and I'm here as a seafloor mapping intern. So my job here is to assist the mapping team in collecting the seafloor data, processing the data, and helping out in whatever way I can on this mission here.
Andrew is standing at the location where we launch an instrument called an underway CTD, or conductivity, temperature, and depth profiler.
Yeah, so this CTD, we launch about every 8 hours. We attach a probe to the cast here, and we send it down about 500 meters, and it collects temperature and salinity data, and this helps us correct for the sound speed through the water column. And it helps us get a better return on the multi-beam signal we send down and receive.
Right. So imagine bouncing a ball off the floor and then bouncing that ball off of a table. It's going to come back to you more quickly from the table because it travels less distance. That's essentially the theory behind this multi-beam sonar mapping. We're bouncing sound off of the seafloor, and based on the knowledge of how fast it travels, we can conduct the time delay in receiving the echo from the seafloor into a depth estimate of the water beneath the ship. So, but it's very important to know that speed of sound and water, and that's what we get from the data collected by the UCTD, or another instrument that we use at night, an XBT, an expendable bathythermograph, which only measures temperature. So that's part of the job of the mapping interns, and when they're not working on that, they're in our data lab, fine-tuning the sonar, talking to the bridge watch team to find the right course and speed so that we can get excellent sonar returns from the seafloor.
Yeah, so that's kind of what we're out here doing. Again, what we're looking at is going to be guiding our decision-making process for the next season and seasons to come. So it's very exciting that we are in an area that literally nobody has ever explored. So every day is something new and exciting. We find things that we didn't expect to find, which is at the heart of the Hawaiian culture here when we're honoring this very sacred place that we are privileged really to be in. So that's also something to kind of keep in mind. The Hawaiian culture, the Polynesian culture is well known for being brave explorers, and being very in tune with their environment. So it is important, but we also recognize that cultural significance of this place. And when you're out here sort of in the middle of the ocean, and I can show you right over here, it's really easy to look at this beautiful location and just kind of feel that connection with the world that's wider than yourself. And I think that's important when you're looking at the Hawaiian culture and their permission for us to be in this area, assisting with this combined effort, which I just think is very important to mention. I know that I feel privileged to be here. Sure, Emil and Andrew feel just as privileged. But yeah, that is what we are doing, guys, and we would love to take your questions.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you for that presentation today, and thank you for that view. It looks like a beautiful sunset, a beautiful day in store for you coming up. And obviously a shout out to Andrew out on the back deck. Thank you for moving in for us. So we are going to turn things over to classrooms in just a moment, but a couple little questions I just want to touch on. So one being, you mentioned, how much of the area in the zone, the economic exclusion zone, that still remains to be mapped. I'm wondering, on a whole, looking at our planet, roughly how much of the ocean floor do we still have left to map?
Still have 80% to go, Joe. So we're just scratching the surface. There's an international effort called Seabed 2030 to try to get that mapped to the modern standards by 2030. That's going to take a lot of work. Not only ships, but autonomous vehicles as well will be an important player there. So uncrewed vessels underway, pinging off the seafloor and helping us to fill these gaps. That's a tall order, but it's
excited to contribute.
Something to shoot for. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you mentioned you're exploring, you're mapping these seamounts because there will be a future expedition to use the ROV. So it's good to know what features are there, what to focus on, what to avoid. What are some other reasons why we're so interested in that goal of mapping the seafloor by 2030? What are some other benefits to having those maps?
By getting an idea of how many seamounts we have out there, how they're aligned, how they might have been formed. We're learning about how the Earth works. We're still trying to understand the behavior of these mantle plumes that create hotspots on the seafloor that result in island chains like the Hawaiian Islands, or this ridge that we're mapping, the Liliʻuokalani Ridge. It looks like it was created by an ancient hotspot. So there's the knowledge of the geology of the Earth and the geological processes that lead to formation of the ocean crust and the seamounts on it. But then there's also the goal of documenting what lives where and why, and how do the various animals in the ecosystems interact with each other. So these seamounts ecosystems that we're going to be discovering, the corals and sponges, they serve as ecosystem engineers. They attract other animals, and they could be an important part of commercially valuable fish that might interact with these ecosystems. So there's that aspect as well. There are benefits to human health. One deep ocean sponge recently was found to have a compound that fights an aggressive form of brain cancer. These sponges have evolved to live in a microbial soup, if you will, so they have natural defenses that we have not come across in species on land. And finally, there's also mineral wealth in the oceans. There are manganese nodules, there is ferromanganese crusts on these seamounts, and there are rare earth elements around hydrothermal vents. These are necessary for green technologies, solar panels, wind turbines, cell phones. But we really have to have a good understanding of how mining those minerals would disrupt the ecosystems. Would they cause irreparable harm to some of these valuable ecosystems? So we're kind of in a race against time there to document the ecosystems down there.
All right, excellent. Well, before we turn things over to classrooms, I'm going to load up a little Kahoot quiz to see how well our students were paying attention today. So I'm going to pop a link up here. So here it is, kahoot.it. If you head there, it's going to offer you a spot to put in a pin, and I'm going to share that pin very shortly. Now, if you're in the classroom and you have one-to-one tech, like a iPad or a Chromebook, feel free to join that way. If you don't have that, your teacher can load it up at the front and you can shout out your answers. So we'll see who's ready to join in. So that's the website. I'm going to share my screen right now. So we'll share that pin. Bear with me for just a moment. Here it comes. There we go. So there is our pin for the quiz today, 912-6712. So we'll see if anybody joins us today with their tech. There's going to be 4 questions. Each question you have 20 seconds. If you get the answer right, of course, you get some points. If you get it right quick, you get even more. And then, of course, if you get it wrong but really fast, well, you got nothing. So here we go. I see we've got already about 20 students have joined us so far. We'll give things another few seconds, and then we'll see who ends up in those top 3 spots, the coveted podium for today's quiz. So up over 30. We'll give it another couple more seconds. Looks like we're pushing 40. All right, 50. Okay, well, we're up over 60, so let's launch now, and here we go. Okay, first question coming up in 3, 2, 1. How long is Nautilus? So that was mentioned right at the very beginning by Cassie. Was it 50 feet, 100 feet, 224, or 276 feet long? How long is Nautilus? All right, most went with 224 feet. Good job. Let's see where our leaderboard is. Alex is hanging out in first place, but it's close. It's a tie, so he must have got in just a little bit quicker. Let's get that next question in. How much more of the ocean floor do we still have to map? Did Amal tell us it was 60%, 80%, 30%, or 50% of that ocean floor still left for us to map? A few more seconds on the clock. All right, most went with 80% left to go. So still a big goal. Steven has taken that top spot. Let's go to our third question. About how old are the seamounts being mapped right now? Were they 10 to 15 million years old, 20 to 30 million years old, 75 to 90 million years old, or 100 to 110 million years old? All right, most students went with 75 to 90 million years old. What did that do to our podium? Alex in the lead. 1 question to go. Anything can happen. Let's wrap it up. What are some reasons why mapping the ocean floor is important? Was it managing fishing, so knowing what lives where and why? Safely piloting ROVs on future expeditions? Learning about how the Earth works, or geology? Or was it all of the above? There's a reason why mapping that ocean floor is important. All right, all of the above, most went with that. Let's check out that final podium. Third place goes to Paul. Good job, Paul. Second place, Jared. And holding down that top spot, we've got Alex. All right. All right, thanks everybody for playing along today. Let's kill that screen share and let's get to a little bit of Q&A action. Here we go. So if you're tuning in live via YouTube, use that side chat. You can send me in some questions. I already see a few groups that have said hi. Toronto, Ontario, Nova Scotia, Canada. But for now, let's bring in some of our live crew. So we're going to go to Maine to start this time with Miss Whipple. We've got some grade 4s hanging out with us. Let's bring them into the call. Hey, grade 4s, how we doing?
Hi, I'm Garrett. I've got a question. How long have you been operating the ship for?
We got underway here on October 24th. So a little over a week and a half, and we'll be finishing up on November 13th and then getting ready for the next expedition. The ship, though, Dr. Ballard has had it since 2010.
All right, very cool. I'm going to bring in our next crew. So Ms. Whipple's class will come visit you shortly for another question, but I'm going to bring in some high schoolers who are hanging out with us in Toronto with Mr. Duggan. Let's bring them in. Looks like a geography crew. How are we doing, grade 9s?
Oh, yeah. Good. You're doing good. Oh,
yeah. You're okay, I think. Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry. Good question?
Do you believe more money should go to mapping the ocean or space exploration?
I don't know if you heard that.
Well, I'll say that you could map a lot of the ocean. We could probably achieve that 2030 goal of mapping the ocean for a small fraction of what we spend on space exploration. But, I do believe we need to do both if possible. And there's a very interesting connection between seafloor exploration and space exploration now, because the NASA scientists believe that we may be able to find ecosystems similar to what we have around deep sea hydrothermal vents elsewhere in our solar system, namely one of the moons of Jupiter, Europa, which has a frozen surface of the ocean, but possibly hydrothermal vent systems down on its seafloor. So we're working together.
Yeah, and I think that collaboration is really important when you're just talking about science in general. That feeling that we're all contributing to knowledge that's going to benefit humanity. I think funding for everybody would be great.
More funding for science everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. And speaking of that collaboration, I know in the past you've had NASA scientists on board, whether it's looking at equipment or ecosystems. And so it kind of highlights that collaboration between those two. Might seem very different, but there's a lot of overlap in the field. Okay, well, a question here from the YouTube chat about the multi-beam sonar. Is it possible to see animals if they're large enough, and do you think it disrupts sea life in any way?
So
Great.
Andrew, do you want to go ahead and take this one?
Sure. Yeah, we have safety measures to make sure we are not disrupting any sea life or marine mammals. Whenever we turn on the echo sounder, we do a slow ramp up so that we don't turn it on at max power and scare them. And we can sometimes detect some sea life in the water column. You can't really get any detail view of it. You don't really know what it is, but you do get some interference from sea life, which is really cool.
Right. While we were mapping King George Seamount last week, we saw some evidence of schools of fish on the rims of the summit. It was a flat-topped seamount, a geo, and along the edge of it, it looked like there may have been schools of fish. But that's just based on what looks like a strong return from the water column between the ship and the seafloor.
All right, very cool. Let's bring back in our crew from Maine and see if they have another question for us. There they are. Looks like they do. Might have to visit a couple times.
Hi, I'm Ellis. I have a question for you. What type of animals do you see?
Well, on this expedition, we haven't been sending the ROVs down, but we did drop a Dropcam developed by National Geographic. It's a camera that sits on the seafloor for a period of time and then rises back up to the surface. And we saw this oilfish on the top of King George Seamount. We also saw a deep sea stingray, little hard. It almost looks like the blends in with the rocks on the seafloor there. But so that's exciting to see. On the summit of King George, there are fish that may be attracting other fish that prey on them. But it's also a question of what these fish are eating. And so to determine that, we would need to send down our remotely operated vehicles, which we hope to do in April next season on this the same area where we're mapping today. When we do go down with those vehicles, we see these beautiful corals and sponges that I mentioned earlier. They are filter feeders. They like the currents on these seamounts. And I think we'll be able to show you an example of one of these corals. Yeah, these deep sea corals that do not have algae living in them like shallow water coral reefs do, but these are purely filtering their food out of the water column. We also see crustaceans that crawl around on these corals and sponges, and some fish that take shelter behind them to get out of the strong currents.
All right, very cool. Thanks for pulling up those clips. Let's go back to our grade 9 Geo crew, see if they have another question for us.
I'd just like to ask, what happens if there's like if you've missed a spot or gone past a spot, or if there's tech issues? Like, what procedures come into play there?
Right. If you're referring to our mapping coverage. So we do keep a close eye on that. We don't like gaps in our data, and so the ship can try to catch that on its next pass, or after we finish up most of the mapping, we can come back down on a certain pass to address gaps, and that can happen when you've got steep bathymetry, and so where you're trying to map is in the shadow of your sonar. So sometimes you just got to go back and get the right angle to fill in those gaps. Good question.
Yeah, we kind of call it mowing the lawn. So you just
Right.
go back and forth, and it does look like we're mowing the ocean.
Right. We have to choose that course based on the winds and speeds out there. If we've got too much wave action and bubbles affecting the sonar data, that's going to create noise and gaps. So we find the right course and speed, and then try to address the gaps that are caused by the steepness of the seafloor.
All right, we've got an eagle-eyed student on YouTube, and they saw some green lasers when we looked at that coral. Can you tell us what those green lasers are?
So those green laser dots are just for scale, so you can see how big it is when you're watching us live. They're 10 centimeters apart, and that just kind of gives us an idea of how big the organisms are. When you're underwater, if you've ever stood in a puddle of water and you look down at your feet, they look big compared to the rest of your feet, and that's known as refraction, so the light is bending. Without those laser dots, it's really hard for us to tell how big are the animals that we're looking at, the rock samples that we're looking at, any sort of feature. So that's just there for scale. We can turn those off when we're taking sort of like a panoramic view of it, and we're going to stitch those together. But generally, we leave those on just so we can kind of figure out how big are the objects or organisms that we're looking at. Excellent question.
All right, paying attention and seeing those little features, very cool. Let's go back to our crew in Maine, because there were so many hands. We should definitely make sure we get in another one there.
Hi, my name is Aiden, and I have a question. How many seamounts are in the world?
I wish we knew, Aiden. That's a very good question. There may be 10,000, maybe 30,000. There are various estimates. We get some guesses on how many seamounts are out there from satellite data. Satellites can't see the seafloor, but they can see the surface of the ocean, which rises and falls, and it mirrors what's happening on the seafloor. So above a large seamount, you'll get a mound of water in the ocean that satellites can detect. So they give us a first guess of how many seamounts are out there, but we don't know for sure until we get out there and map accurately with sonar. But the quick answer is at least 10,000.
All right, that's a great question. I think that really illustrates that, there's lots of careers and exploration available in the ocean. So building on that with a question from YouTube here, what other, we met Andrew, who's a mapping intern, Emma, the expedition lead, we've got a science communication fellow. What other jobs are available on Nautilus and for the crew?
We've got engineers and scientists and communicators, and sometimes artists, or it's just another way to communicate what we're doing out here. But so we have internships for the remotely operated vehicle engineers. They'll learn how to pilot Argus, which the vehicle that keeps an eye on Hercules. There's an engineering background there. Scientists help log the data that we're collecting and what we're seeing down there. Usually a biologist or geologist is leading the scientific exploration, and folks with expertise in geographic information systems or mapping take part as navigators or seafloor mappers.
We also have video crew
out
here. So we do have internship programs for those that are interested in underwater photography or video documentation. So that's an opportunity to get out here, making sure that we are getting those beautiful shots that are being sent out around the world and to scientists around the world to help with identification. So we have those. We have obviously just the ship crew here that kind of keeps us safe, and they're amazing. So a lot of different ways to get involved, and we have our data people that make sure that we're staying connected, electricians. Basically, any passion that you have, you can bring that to the ocean. It covers 70% of our planet. There's a way to take what you love and bring it out here to sea.
All right. Well, I was lucky enough to spend a few weeks on board Nautilus back in 2018, and I want to give a shout out to the food crew. I did not have high expectations, but the food ended up being incredible on board the ship. I'm super impressed. So I'm sure you guys are enjoying some great meals and snacks on your expedition, keeping you fueled.
Oh yeah, and the baking, I think, Joe, has just kept getting better and better.
Yes.
So if you're on a low carb diet, your willpower will be challenged out here. The food is delicious.
It's best to avoid the vents because you can smell them baking, and then also stay away from our galley if you're trying to watch the calories. If not, I call them it's like a holiday. Holiday calories don't count, neither do Nautilus calories. So
sure,
I deal with that when I get off the ship.
Well, we're burning calories just standing up on the ship.
I'm going to go with that.
All right. One more trip to our geo crew. See if they have another question for us. Our grade 9s.
So what's the most interesting landform or things you found on the bottom of the seafloor?
Well, for me, I think the hydrothermal vents, they're just fascinating. Where you've got the water that seeps down through cracks in the ocean crust, gets heated by the magma and rises up at several hundred degrees, as hot as 600 degrees Celsius in some locations. And then the ecosystems that evolve around these vents are just, well, it seems like you're on another planet, but it is planet Earth, and it may be where life originated on Earth. Cassie's sharing a video of one of these vent systems. You see the tube worms, those whitish features on the vent or on the chimney closest to us. So those tube worms have bacteria in them which are able to convert the chemicals coming out of these vents into carbohydrates.
And there you can see our green laser dots giving us our scale. And this is what kind of turned NASA and basically everybody on their head when we realized that we can have life without sunlight. This was a whole new idea when these were first came across. And this is essentially when you're looking at Europa, there is probably some heating happening basically between the gravitational pull on the moon with the sun and then Jupiter itself. And that's almost like you're pulling a rubber band back and forth. And that's what's creating the heat that we might think that, we have these geothermal systems possibly.
Yeah, so and these are occurring along our spreading centers, our mid-ocean ridges. We have them around hotspots, maybe not quite black smokers like this, but hotspots like Liliʻuokalani Seamount, which is forming just southeast of the big island of Hawaii. And we'll have these around subduction zones where we have back arc volcanic features. So there's a lot of vents to be discovered still as well. I think we've got 700, I think, that we've documented so far.
Yeah.
But there could be thousands of them in the oceans.
And some really interesting life that lives around all of them, which is just fascinating.
Yeah, I happen to like submarine canyons as well. They're like the Grand Canyon, but in the ocean, and another favorable spot for strong currents and filter feeders.
All right. So what we're learning is it's hard to pick your favorite. There's so many exciting features on the bottom of the seafloor to check out. Very cool. Okay, take us home. One more question from Miss Whipple's crew.
Okay. Go ahead, Hunter.
My name is Hunter, and I have a question for you. How much money was the expedition?
How much money is the expedition? Hunter, boy, you're asking a great question. It's expensive to be out here, but as you've seen from some of the information we've shown you, the payoff can be really big. So roughly $40,000 to $60,000 a day to operate a ship like Nautilus while we're out here. That's communications, the high bandwidth satellite communications back to shore, the vehicles on board, and the crew and science team. keeping them fed and employed. So it's an expensive endeavor, but well worth it in the end when you see how much the ocean gives to us and how vital it is for life on Earth.
All right. Well, I want to start off with a huge shout out to our YouTube crew who joined us today. Thanks for playing the Kahoot and sending us in some questions. Thank you to our camera classrooms in Maine and Toronto today. Great to see you and awesome questions. And then to our crew, our Nautilus, Cassie, Emil, Andrew, hanging out at the back. Thank you so much for taking us live out on the Pacific today. There's Andrew. Thanks, Andrew. Looks like you got a great day in store. It's always great to see that wide open ocean. And best of luck for the rest of the expedition.
Thanks so much. Please make sure that you follow us on nautiluslive.org. Send in your live questions as we continue our next legs of the journey.
Thanks, everybody. Super questions. Keep studying.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.